We good to go? Cool. Right, so good afternoon or good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest IGB webinar, which has the title Canada's PASPA Moment. Now, this might seem quite a grand title, obviously considering, the wholesale changes we've seen in the US in the wake of the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. But when you think about the scale of the opportunity in Canada, that's, it's a pretty justified title. So what's going on? So we have the Canadian federal government throwing its support behind a bill to legalise single event sports betting, which means that Canadian bettors will be legally able to wager on single outcomes for the first time. And then we've got a second kind of wave of liberalisation coming, most evidently in Ontario, which is opening up its iGaming market to private operators. And just kind of give you an idea of the size of Ontario, I suppose that's probably just a bit smaller in population than somewhere like Pennsylvania. And to do this topic justice, especially with this rather grand title, we wanted to bring together a panel of real kind of like leaders in this field. So we've got Canada's leading gaming lawyer, we've got its most progressive and successful provincial lottery, we've got its leading sports media business, and we've got a pioneer and arguably a winner in the early stages of kind of melding esports and gaming together. And just before I hand over the panel to introduce themselves, a few housekeeping notes. So we are recording this session, so it's going to be available to listen on demand and share with your colleagues. And we are also taking questions, so please get them in early, and hopefully we're going to have some time to go through as many of these as we can. And that's hopefully going to be largely it from me, because my name's Robin Harrison, I'm a news editor at IGB, and I'm really here just kind of direct the discussion a bit, because obviously you guys want to hear from the panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the guys just to give a quick introduction. Should we start with you, Grant?
Sure. Thanks, Robin. Grant Johnson, CEO and founder of Esports Entertainment Group. We're listed on the NASDAQ. Our symbol is GMBL for gamble, which seems appropriate for this conversation today. My background, I was involved in the online gambling business at Genesis out of Vancouver, where Ron and Stuart are, with StarNet, which is famous or infamous, depending on your position on the industry. I came back into the industry in 2014 with a focus on esports and bringing it into the market. And as you alluded to, Robin, we have been doing a lot working directly with the pro sports teams and integrating esports into their product mix. So for mine, I'm cautiously optimistic about the moves Canada's making. It does seem a little bit back of a reboot of 1998 and Dennis Mills' first push at this, but I'm sure we'll get into it later on. The landscape is radically different today than it was back then, but looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Grant. And Benji, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Robin. Hi, guys. I'm Benji Levy. I'm the president and chief operating officer of The Score. We are one of North America's leading mobile sports media brands, Canada's leading digital media platform, and we've really taken a different differentiated approach to sports betting, where we're coming to the market with our betting platform, completely integrated with with our sports media platform, and the belief that sports betting is just another part of the sports fans experience for a large number of sports fans. Our betting platform is live in the U.S., in New Jersey, Indiana, and Colorado. We're going to be launching in Iowa soon. And we're looking very forward to having the opportunity to roll out our platform on our home turf in Ontario in hopefully the very near future.
Thank you. And now Ron.
Good morning, everyone from Vancouver. Ron Segev. I'm a gaming and betting lawyer with Segev LLP, a firm that I co-founded about 8 years ago. ranked by Chambers and Partners as one of the top gaming and betting firms in Canada. I'm ranked as a Band 1 gaming lawyer. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years, represent more broadly interactive entertainment companies, so everything from video game companies to esports companies, but the real focus is online gaming and betting across all verticals, and real pleasure to be here. This is an exciting time for Canada. It's nice to see some movement in the market.
Thanks, Ron and Stuart.
Everyone, good morning. Stuart Comunis, I'm with BC Lottery Corporation. I operate playnow.com, which is our online platform. Been with BCLC for about 10 years now and witnessed us go basically increase our revenue by about tenfold. As it stands today, we are the highest per capita revenue generating online regulated operator in North America.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Now, to kick off, I thought it'd be good just kind of talk through the background a bit, because obviously, as you said there, Grant, it feels a bit back to the future. So obviously, with the government, you know, supporting the single event betting bill, I was keen to find out what you guys think. You know, like why has there been this kind of shift in approach? You know, what's kind of like changed minds?
Well, I think the biggest driver, well, certainly in Canada, there's really two. One, what's happened in the States. They've been watching the progress there with the state-by-state regulators rolling out their platforms fairly aggressively since 2018. But I think the biggest motivator right now has been COVID has put some serious economic strains on all the government coffers. And I suspect that was a huge factor in moving this forward at this time, as governments figure out their revenue model going forward. This seems like an easy one for them. I suspect that those are both factors here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Maybe some background on how our regime is structured would be helpful. So, you know, at a very high level, our gaming and betting law is set out in our Canadian Criminal Code. And basically what it says is that all gaming and betting activity in Canada is prohibited unless it falls under an exception. And one of the key exceptions to the prohibition is unless it's conducted and managed by a province, and the province can elect to do so or not. And most provinces have in various guises. So BC, Ontario, and Quebec, for notable example, have decided to launch online portals, and with varying degrees of success or failure, depending on your perspective. Ontario's experience has been not a great success, and you know, my read on the situation is that and I understand we will be talking about Ontario shortly, but with Ontario's push towards liberalizing its B2C regime, or I should say its iGaming regime, it needs to remain competitive, and in doing so, it needs to be able to provide products that the offers are providing, namely single event sports wagering. And the only way it can do that is if it appeals to the federal government and asks the federal government to amend the current legislation, which prohibits single event sports wagering. Currently, under the federal regime, the only sports wagering allowed is a parlay bet. And so if we're going to keep up with the times, so to speak, then we need to, both on the provincial track and on the federal track, they have to work together. And you know, the province of Ontario is the second. It sort of comprises half the market. It's the largest province by a long shot in Canada. It's got a lot of clout with the federal government, and so I think the two work together very, very closely.
Okay, thanks, Ron. And I think it would be good just to kind of give the audience a bit of an indication of the kind of distance left to travel, because obviously the bill has government support. So, so I was wondering if the panel, like maybe you, Ron, can from the legal side just kind of give us a bit of a steer on, you know, like how long this is going to kind of like take to get.
Yeah, good question. The reason that there's a bit more excitement around this today compared to the previous attempts is, and I should say that there have been previous attempts to legalize single event sports wagering at the federal level. The key difference today is twofold. One, previously the attempt was driven by a private member's bill, and now it's a government bill that's going through. And the reason that's important is because government's bill is exactly that. It's a bill that is being pushed forward by a cabinet minister, and without getting into the sort of the arcane minutiae of how a bill travels through, in short form, it just gets more attention. It gets time for debate, gets time on the floor, it gets priority. Whereas a private member's bill can get buried under the pile, and if there's no time to debate, then it's just not reviewed, and it could get lost. So that's the first bit, and then the second reason that this is exciting today, other than it being a government bill, is the fact that as Grant alluded to, the government needs to replenish its coffers. Ontario in particular was hit hard by COVID, and so if Ontario is going to make a healthy go of its new gaming regime, then single event sports wagering is a big part of that equation, and putting pressure on the federal government to actually make this thing fly is important. Now, timelines expected. Generally speaking, the way a bill becomes law is it goes through 3 readings in the House, and then it goes to Senate for approval. The bill has currently cleared through the first reading. We're still waiting for the second and third reading and then Senate approval. In the past, it's usually died at Senate, so it has in the past made it through 3 readings. We're expecting it to obtain Senate approval and then obtain royal assent and become law. I've got my my intel across the industry and lobbyists that I'm speaking to and lawmakers that I'm speaking to. There's confidence that this is going to happen. We're hoping sometime in March, April, with the new budget dropping. But of course, the Senate has an independent mind. They do listen very carefully to what the federal government has to say. But we are hopeful that hopefully March, April, we'll see something.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Stuart and Benji, I'm keen to bring in you guys here because I think it'd be interesting to get some perspective, from the kind of provincial lottery side, and then from the score, obviously, with the US sportsbook operations, insight in how you guys are kind of like tracking and preparing for this. Because, as Ron says, we could be looking at something as soon as March. What are you guys doing to sort of, get ready, as it were?
Yeah, I think the other important point is that this has obviously been working on a dual track. So even though the federal government picked up the single event sports betting file in the fall, the provincial government in Ontario actually has been working on this for a much longer period of time. They first introduced their objective of modernizing online gaming back when they released their budget in April of 2019, and over a period of 18 months have been closely consulting with industry and with experts about what what framework they're going to want to pursue, how they're going to organize themselves, who's going to manage the relationship between the government and industry, and ultimately kind of that culminated with kind of a rather significant decision that they put out, in their fall economic statement when they decided that it was going to be the AGCO that was going to manage the relationship. So a lot of work has been going on behind the scenes as Ontario has been trying to figure out what their path and what their framework is going to be. So that's in our view very positive. Those consultations are continuing now. Obviously, from a single event sports perspective, that's a binary go no go decision from the federal government perspective. But even short of that, Ontario is on their own parallel path here to legalize and modernize online gaming in the province, and expand it to private operators. And so from the perspective of the score, we've been very involved in, in consultations at all levels of government, and, are just, we're very pleased with how things, seem to be progressing. There's more work to do, to be sure. But kind of the timelines that Ron is hearing are the timelines that we are hearing, and, to the point about the Senate, the last time this fell over in the Senate was a totally different environment and set of circumstances. As Grant was pointing out, a lot has changed. Whether that's the movement in the states, post PASPA and all sorts of and over a dozen states legalizing sports betting in one form or fashion. Obviously, there's the COVID environment, but there's also the more macro environment with how sports leagues in North America are approaching sports betting. After PASPA fell, you've seen all of the professional sports leagues engage constructively with regulators, with industry, figure out what the best approach is here. And whereas in the past, the leagues have been less supportive of sports betting. Currently, everybody is on board. They recognize that it's a part of the sports fans' experience, that it has to be done in the right way, in a regulated fashion, in a fashion where players are protected, where the integrity of games are protected, but that it's something that's here to stay. So we wouldn't expect similar issues to be impacting the process this time.
I should also add that this isn't just an Ontario story. I expect the other provinces want to see this through too, because for BCLC, for example, on playnow.com would probably stand to benefit from being able to provide a product similar to some of the offshores that are trying to access the market. I'll let Stuart speak to that in more detail, but I think that's a fair hunch.
Yeah, I could say BCLC is absolutely supporting this. And we're pushing for it. We see it as an opportunity to level the playing field, as you said, with the gray market or the illegal operators. On top of that, we see it as an opportunity to repatriate the funds. Obviously, funds coming from BC players that go into BCLC go back to the people of BC, and that's important to us. Also, just as important is the player health aspect. With people going to these gray market sites, they don't have the same protections they have with BCLC. So we are prepared to execute online, essentially as soon as we get that approval from both the federal and the provincial government. We're aligned to do that. As I said, the big focus for us is to repatriate those funds. In speaking with other jurisdictions, there's different varying degrees of capability to roll it out. There's obviously technical requirements if you're looking at either online or land-based. But for the most part, sports platforms are designed and built to accept singles. And in Canada, we've actually had to take that capability out. So basically bringing that capability back is much easier. We also see in the land-based space a massive opportunity. This is also driven by the culture shift in North America. As the US embraces sports betting more and more, and we see this in mainstream media, we see all the leagues getting involved, what's happening is that's coming into Canada, because obviously a lot of the media and a lot of the sports that Canadians enjoy are actually out of the United States. So we're seeing the flow over effect of that. We're seeing, especially in the young male demographic, a much bigger engagement in sports betting. So when we look at the land-based opportunity, we look at an opportunity that parallels what we've seen in the casino space, where we've been extremely successful in British Columbia. So we definitely see a rollout there. We see an ability to tie together on our online and our offline offerings, and really bring a great sports experience to our customers across BC.
Okay, and that sort of brings it on quite nicely. Just to talk a bit more about the kind of like the product that works for the Canadian bettor, because so in terms of the sports that people are going to be looking for, I mean, is it fair to say hockey is kind of going to be the key driver, in terms of like betting activity, or do you see other sports kind of growing in popularity? Because of course, like the single event betting bill was supported by, a range of major US leagues. So I mean, what are players after? I suppose.
I mean, look, Rob, I mean, obviously, Canada loves hockey. We see it, in the consumption of content on our sports app. But you know, we have tremendous audience for NFL, tremendous audience for, you know, NBA content, and so you know, yes, well, you know, betting on hockey, you know, we would expect to do more handle on hockey up here than we do, you know, in our sports books in the U.S. You know, you're going to see, in my view, tremendous activity on all of the North American sports. You know, NFL is tremendously popular here, NBA is tremendously popular here. You know, on our sports at college, you know, U.S. college sports are tremendously popular with our audience, and baseball too. So I think you know, it's a bit of a Canadian stereotype to say hockey, 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 hockey. We'll do very well with hockey here, but it's going to be, you know, we're expecting very broad-based interest, you know, across all the North American sports.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, as of now, we actually see just as much activity on NBA, NFL. I do think that there's going to be a bit of a paradigm shift. I think right now, when you have the parlay rule, what we're seeing more people betting on other sports because they need the second leg of their parlay as well. So tennis does quite well for us because there's a number of games going off. I do think with the casual bettors, it'll be more about what's going on in the bars and pubs, what they're watching on TV. Once the bars and pubs open, what they're watching on TV, and then the ability to take more of a recreational stance on their bets. So I do think we'll see a shift more to align to exactly what Benji said, the media they're consuming, because that's where the casual punters are going to look to put their money.
And then what about products such as esports? Because obviously, you know, Grant, you like it so much than the name of the business. And then the Score's obviously done very well kind of covering esports, you know, from the media side. So how does that, you know, fit into that? Do you see that as a kind of an entirely new customer base, the traditional sports fan? How do you go about engaging these guys?
Well, you know, as Stuart mentioned, you know, the young demographic, which is the coveted demographic, you know, that 20, 35-year-old, and overwhelmingly the esports product, that's the demographic for that product, and most of their viewings online as opposed to cable TV, etc. Esports 4 years ago was very much a subculture, wasn't really taken seriously, but as we saw last spring with everything shutting down in pro sports, there wasn't a whole lot for the fans to watch, and Benji's numbers, I'm sure, will show it, as will Stuart's. Overwhelmingly, people shifted to esports, and we've got a sports book in the UK. 55% of the handle was coming from esports, overwhelmingly on the virtual titles, you know, FIFA and 2K, because those are the easy games for the sports fan to follow. So there's really two camps in esports. There's we'll call it traditional esports fan, which is Dota, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, which are the bigger esports fan bases. But where we're seeing the bigger movement, which is, you know, why we're signing agreements with the Eagles, the Kings, etc., is the sports fan who also follows esports. So it's going to be part of the product mix. There's no question about it. The esports fan does have a bit of a different betting pattern. I think Stuart and Benji would both agree to that. You're not going to see, or we have never seen, $1,000 bet come down on an esports event, but they micro bets, a lot of in-game betting, so they bet differently, but they do bet. It is growing. It's going to have to be part of the conversation, no question.
I think that one of the questions that I have, and I've had conversations with some senior people at the AGCO about esports, and currently they're not certain that they're going to be allowing esports betting as part of their new regime. I'm wondering if Grant or Benji or Stuart know anything more about that.
I was going to say, I don't have any specific intel on where the AGCO is at. I mean, I think with esports, you know, as a whole, I think, you know, from the regulators that we're dealing with in the U.S., they all are aware that esports is big and it's growing. You know, it takes, you know, sometimes it takes, there's a learning curve, to be sure, about, you know, what are the role of the, the people in the ecosystem, where are the games being played. You know, a lot of the regulators in the States have a lot of concern about who's playing the games, In the jurisdictions where we operate, like in New Jersey, for example, the participants can't be under 18. We run into this issue not with just esports, but oddly enough, with some European soccer too, where there's under 21s, and you have to be very diligent about the actual compositions of the rosters. But it's gaining momentum, and you're seeing them take, they're putting one foot in. They're saying, okay, so we're going to start to take bets, in a limited fashion on the higher profile tournaments, the ones that we're comfortable with, and that's only going to expand over time. I mean, when you look at some of what's happening in the offshore market, I mean, esports, writ large, is a top 5 betting league, for a number of these offshore books, and so it's only a matter of time. And we see that in our media business, and we're the second biggest esports channel on YouTube, where we're producing tons of content, and we are seeing, and it's different engagement than our core sports audience, but it is tremendous, passionate, engagement about players and about teams. And our view is that just like in traditional sports, that extends. We see it with esports fans playing fantasy and esports fans starting to bet. And so, it is not going to, it is going to be a gradual build as the market develops, as regulators get comfortable. But if eyes up on the horizon, esports, our view is betting on esports will be as meaningful as betting on what people perceive today to be the core North American sports.
Yeah, I would just add, in BC, we saw exactly what you mentioned, Grant. We saw massive engagement as COVID took off and leagues started to shut down. We've had esports for a few years. Previous to the COVID pandemic, we actually had some events at some of our local casinos where we would have somewhat of a forum there for people to watch the esports events and actually wager on the online platform. We see it as a massive opportunity, and we recognize it is a growth area, but it's also a learning area for a lot of operators and regulators, because it's understanding that there's different tiers of these types of events and understanding the different levels of integrity that surround them. So it definitely is a learning curve, but I think we're moving along that path.
Yeah, one thing that needs to be kept in mind, I mean, people, when they use the word esports, some people think of it as sort of a homogenous thing. And it's like saying sports. Well, that includes pole vault to NFL. They're different audience, different sport, different thing. Esports is the same way. And, most, I suspect, people certainly over 50, they think of esports as their kid at home playing on the Xbox or the PlayStation. And it's 14, 15-year-old. That's the perception in a lot of people's heads, particularly in regulators' heads. Whereas the reality, and I had a similar perception pre-2014 until I attended a championship event, and I don't think there was anybody under 20 in the room. It was StarCraft, and it was in Toronto. And it is a lot about education, but it's also about the titles, and the audience that follows certain titles has a tendency of trending older as well. And so all this, there's a lot of things going on here, and it's not, you can't just say esports. It's either all in or all out. I think Benji and Stu both know this. The first in Atlantic City, the first esport wagering that took place in the sports books was just this past fall. It was a Legends tournament, and we were the primary sponsor, but it was an allied tournament. That was the first time. So this is all fresh territory, and the regulators are finally taking it serious and adding it to their regulatory framework. We work very closely, as does Benji, with the New Jersey Gaming Commission. They're very involved in our new product launch, and we're also bringing in some skill-based betting, and the regulators are also getting involved in that, where previously they had more or less ignored it. The skills.com has kind of worked around the edges of betting, because so the skills betting and gambling have been separated, and now the gaming commissions, these are also on the table in the discussions, and language is being added. So it's not just in Canada. I mean, this is very quickly evolving all around the globe, and I would just reiterate that it's coming. The fans want it. They will bet, and the gaming commissions are trying to play catch up, but trying to do it without making any mistakes. And I don't know if that's possible to not make any mistakes.
Thanks, guys. I'm just going to grab onto the US thread there, because obviously you mentioned Atlantic City there, Grant. I mean, is it fair to say that, you know, the rollout of sports betting in the US offers lessons for Canada, or do you feel they're very kind of distinct markets? You know, like what can be sort of, you know, like kind of brought up north from the States, you know, in the finance experience?
I'll jump in. I think the big takeaway is that this is possible, and you know, where in the past there was a lot of focus on you know, protection of the public interest and the possible harm that could result by opening up the regime, we're seeing that, you know, we have the processes and technologies in place to look after responsible gaming issues, and we also see that there's huge demand. I mean, New Jersey's been an unmitigated success. So this is, you know, this is a path to collecting tax revenue. And, you know, we didn't see any of the, you know, the news stories that some of the policymakers were worried about, you know, about kids betting or people losing their shirts or anything like that. So I think maybe they've de-risked the venture for us to some degree.
Yeah, I would agree. I found it interesting as New Jersey launched, and we were here in BC about a dozen years into our online offering, and we kept hearing, you know, this is a new thing. And we were looking in Canada at each other saying, we've been in this for a while. But so it is interesting because it is a different model, and I think you see different models across the different states, obviously with varying degrees of success. But I think what everybody is recognizing is that you can offer, as Ron was saying, you can offer online gambling in a safe fashion. You can help protect players, and the key is to get it into regulated arenas, because without the oversight, without some sort of governing body, that's truly where the risk resides. And if we don't provide the opportunities for players to play in a regulated fashion, all we're doing is we're pushing them to the illegal market where they don't have the safeguards, where you don't have the ability to help those customers. And that's truly where I feel the risk lies.
I want to make a comment there because, you know, I go back to when it started, Genesis, you know, 1996 in Canada, and Canada was at the forefront of this entire industry. And at that time, we were moving a mature industry online, sports betting, casino. And in the States and in Canada, the regulators came down hard. As Ron knows, I was part of the story and you saw it firsthand. They literally shut down the industry, and all they did, to Stuart's point, is pushed everybody who wanted to bet to foreign operators. Now, that, you know, I'm not saying Russian foreign operators or somebody in jurisdiction like that. They pushed into the open arms of the UK, quality operators, quality jurisdictions, but no benefit came back to Canada. And you know, now we've got an industry that's $100 billion plus mature industry, and the Americans and Canadians want it back, and they want those tax revenues in their coffers. That's what's going to drive this discussion. It's not like these are flaky operators. There is top quality operators working from tier 1 jurisdictions, and they're benefiting to the demise of the Canadian governments. And this is a way to, and we're supportive of this. We have 3 tier 1 licenses. We're NASDAQ audited, fully transparent, and as you know, Stuart's operation, they're part of the fabric. And I'm a fan of regulation, because if you don't regulate it, bring it in and tax it, which is what we tried to do back, Ron, with Dennis Mills way back in '97. I was a fan of it then. I'm a fan of it now, because either Canada gets the benefit from it, or it's going to go somewhere else. And either we, you know, move forward in this, regulate it, tax it, monitor it here, or people are going to bet. It's not a new thing. They've been doing it for generations, and they're going to keep doing it. And when you talk about sports, it's not that people are betting because they're watching because they're betting. It improves their engagement. So they want to do it. So why wouldn't we, support it, get behind it? That off my soapbox.
Yeah. And obviously, one of the kind of things that we saw with the US was well, there still is an ongoing kind of wave of M&A. Could we expect to see something similar in Canada, or some kind of like strategic partnerships or investment? Is it essentially what I'm getting at is the opportunity for that same kind of like industry consolidation as the incumbents, once they kind of get familiar with new vertical, look to, acquire to bring those capabilities in-house? I mean, what kind of scope is there for that?
I mean, listen, as things have opened up in the U.S., you're seeing a tremendous land grab, whether it's M&A or, huge, massive spending on player acquisition, massive media deals between gaming operators and media companies, for, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure access to these audiences that these media companies have built, because the gaming operators are looking to build a footprint. I think one of the big questions is as that's taking place, how sustainable is that approach? But I think Ontario is the 5th largest jurisdiction by population in North America, with over 14 million people. Assuming this progresses on the timeline that we all anticipate it's going to progress on, it's going to be the first, it will be the biggest online gaming jurisdiction in North America. I mean, when you think about California, Florida, Texas, New York, Ontario. Ontario will be, in our view, when you look at on a per capita basis, betting revenue numbers, out of the UK or out of New Jersey, and you apply those to the Ontario population, Ontario is going to be a $2 billion revenue market, in our view, on a conservative basis. So you are going to see a lot of activity in this market. You're going to see, listen, guys like us on our home turf. You're going to see the big guys from the US. You're going to see, I think, a lot of the gray market guys, come into the open. So I think Ontario is going to be, probably one of the most active jurisdictions in North America. Our full expectation is, from a regulatory perspective, it's going to be, it's going to be, structured well and competitively, and it's going to be, I would expect, that everybody looks at the eye-popping numbers coming out of New Jersey. I think you're going to see that and more here in Ontario.
Yeah, let me add to that. So we're already working on transactions. We've been working on transactions in anticipation of this for the last year. And so what we're seeing is exactly what Benji's talking about. So European companies coming in and doing media deals. We're working with an Israeli company that's doing a deal with a Canadian company, also that has access to traffic. There are lots of opportunities in the country, in particular, not just with media, but we've got racetracks in this country, we've got bingo halls in this country, we've got we've got land-based facilities in this country. People that frequent those venues will gamble online. So lots of transactions revolving around that. The other thing that's notable, just to use Benji's thoughts as a springboard, is that the Greater Toronto Area market, their media market, is the 3rd largest media market in North America after LA and New York City. So in terms of marketing dollar spend, it's a really efficient place to spend your money. You're attracting a vast market of people who bet online. That's the proof's in the pudding there. But so yeah, to answer your question, we will see partnerships. The other thing is, sitting in Canada watching sports on TV, we're already seeing ads, like a huge proliferation of ads. Many of them just rolling out a .NET marketing strategy to start capturing that traffic. And I'm seeing ads by William Hill. I'm seeing ads by some of the other European operators. Of course, in anticipation of all of this. So we're already seeing the marketing spend.
One thing you got to remember when you talk about New Jersey, New York and Philadelphia are only, in the case of New Jersey, I'm sure you've been there, Benji. I don't know if you have, Ron, but I've been in Penn Station on game day, and literally thousands of people get off the train, place their bets in their mobile units, get back in the train, go into the city. So the numbers are inflated in New Jersey well beyond the population, the support of the population, because geographically it's in a unique situation. They got an extra 10 million people they can pull from, and they do.
Yeah.
And then just to, I suppose, kind of shift on to our final kind of segment before we go into questions just about the future. I was keen to ask you, Stuart, with Ontario opening up, I mean, what's the kind of view on that from BCLC? Because obviously, as you're saying, you've been wildly successful in developing an iGaming offering. I mean, do you see it as kind of like a threat when, other states can start to open up their market? Do you feel it's going to kind of invite pressure for a similar scenario in British Columbia?
No, I think we welcome the conversation. I mean, as you said, we've been extremely successful, but we also conduct analysis to see what percentage of the market we've captured and whether or not a licensed model would be more profitable. To this point, from our estimates of the market size and what we've captured of the market, it doesn't seem to be. There's always the balance of, do you want a smaller percentage of a bigger number or a bigger percentage of a smaller number? And we go through that constantly. We're in conversations with our government. We're in conversations with our regulator, GPEB. So it's definitely something that we're welcome. We welcome the conversation, and we do the analysis ourselves and work with those other parties. The one other part of that, though, is there is the financial aspect, but then there's the player health aspect. So BCLC has a $2 billion land-based casino business. We have a $1 billion lottery business, and then now we have obviously a very significantly effective online business. We recognize the opportunity to tie those businesses together, to have one view of a customer, to help protect the customer, to use player health methods against all of their gambling activity within the province and really support those customers. So while there's obviously the financial considerations about going to a license model, I think even more prevalently, we're looking at what does the player health model look like. And so we will be watching Ontario closely. We'll look to what they put in their license regime, what controls are in place. Things like anti-money laundering are obviously core to Canada's focus right now. So with their license model, we need to recognize what have they put in place and then how effective it is to helping the province and to protecting the customers.
Yeah, I'd like to add some flavor to that. From an outsider's perspective, it might appear peculiar that BC has a provincial lottery that's offering online gaming, but locally that's kind of culturally in line with how a lot of things happen in BC. So we have the BC Lottery Corporation, but we also have the Insurance Corporation of BC, and we have BC Hydro, and we have BC Ferries. So we have all these crown corporations that BC residents are used to working with. Excuse me. And it's kind of part of the everyday fabric of life here that we're, conducting commerce with these crown corps. So, my thinking is, as long as BCLC can keep up by offering good product, I don't think that the population is necessarily going to bristle at the fact that it's being offered by the government. I'll also say that we tend to skew a bit left on the political spectrum here. We call it the left coast, or the wet coast in the winter. And so, in that regard, it could be that the population is okay with placing bets on a government site, knowing that tax revenue is going back to the government coffers. So there is a cultural piece there that shouldn't really be ignored.
Well, that's true, but I lived in BC for many years. Innovation is going to come from the private sector.
No doubt. Yeah, and again, I mean, just to Grant, you were mining a thread there that I think is really valuable, and it's the it's the jobs and innovation piece that I'm personally very frustrated by. And as Grant alluded to, Canada at the very early stage was at the forefront of this. And in fact, we still have some phenomenal gaming companies here. They just happen to be operating under the radar. And when I say that, I don't mean that they're operating nefariously or offshore. It's just that we don't have legislative clarity and we don't have policy clarity around what it means to run a gaming business. So I've got some clients who, if you took a technical reading of the Gaming Control Act, would run afoul of it. But really all they're doing is creating software that they're exporting to tier 1 operators. We need a lot of clarity around that. And if we don't have it, it's a real shame, because it's great jobs, it's knowledge economy, it's innovation, extremely well paying. It's sort of the jobs that all provincial governments are trying to develop, bring back onshore. And you need the policy and the legislative alignment to foster that healthy jobs and innovation ecosystem. Right now, we're not there. My hopes is that with the shift in Ontario, that will lead to something. My concern is that it'll lead to something in Toronto, and it won't lead to something in Vancouver and Montreal and in Calgary and in other places. But yeah, the jobs piece is critically important. I totally agree.
I think the only other learning from the U.S. that can be taken is that you certainly see the jurisdiction, the additional jurisdictions looking to what the jurisdictions who launched first, did, and seeing the success, and that begets success in in these additional jurisdictions as they as they roll out. So I think to Grant's point, there's a lot of ability for the private sector to drive innovation here. And the one thing we know is that it is a massive market, and Stuart's points about player health are critically important. This has to be done right. We cannot, it has to be done in a safe, responsible way with proper regulations for KYC and AML, but also responsible gambling, and that has to be embedded in the fabric of, in the fabric of how these operators are in the regulation and how these operators are rolling out into these markets. But our view is that across North America, Canada included, the market can support and sustain a significant number of both government and private operators coexisting very well, and offering a robust and also a differentiated ecosystem. Because the one thing that we know about sports bettors and sports fans is that it's not a homogeneous audience, and and by having platforms that can differentiate based on product, not just based on the odds you're offering or the price you're offering or a couple of markets here and there, but being able to offer bettors a truly differentiated experience, is something that is good for the industry in the long run.
Okay, thanks guys. We're starting to edge towards the end of our time, so I just wanted to quickly jump into an audience question or two. And we've got one here asking a bit more about the affiliate perspective. So this guy is asking, are there any indications yet as to the regime that would be adopted for online sports betting affiliates in a regulated Canadian market? Is it a New Jersey type regime to be expected? Because obviously, Ron, you were saying that there was some kind of deals in the pipeline. So what does everyone think? I mean, is that something, are we going to have like some kind of like approval system for the affiliates?
Yeah, so I've been talking to the AGCO about what they have in mind, and currently they don't know. That's the stock answer I've been getting for the last several months. Yeah, no fault to them. They're building something brand new, and they're just working on it piece by piece, but they don't know. And the deals that I'm seeing that have an affiliate flavor, it's not the classic, affiliate portal with a click through for CPA or rev share. It's more about working with media brands that already have the traffic, just so that you can do kind of a, an exclusive through those brands. Whether or not that's going to be regulated, I don't know, because they don't know.
Okay, thanks. And what else have we got here? Any legislative hurdles? Is there anything that any of you guys feel could, derail things at the last moment? Do you feel the momentum is such that it's unstoppable?
It definitely feels like there's momentum. I would say there are questions around conduct and manage and the responsibility of the different jurisdictions. So obviously the conduct and manage responsibility was applied to the AGCO. There is a question about their ability to hand off that conduct and manage responsibility and the degree of which that can happen. There's varying degrees of the way that the Canadian landscape works today. Obviously in BC, we work with service providers who operate our casinos, but we maintain a certain level of oversight, things like products and things of that nature, player databases. So there is a question around how they will straddle that. And then beyond that, there's also just the question of their ability to execute. Obviously, it's not an easy thing to put a license regime in place. You can approach it and say a copy and paste of another jurisdiction, but at the end of the day, you need to go through quite a laborious endeavor to make sure you've got a license regime that works for your jurisdiction.
Well, yeah, and I'm speaking for ourselves here. One of the things that everybody who's listening, everybody in this panel knows, is there's a lot of different views of what is a good idea, what's a bad idea when it comes to setting up these regimes. Certainly, Canada has the benefit of looking at some very mature European operations that, UK is probably an excellent example, but they can also watch what's happening in Germany right now in real time. In addition to taking a view from the States, what I hope doesn't happen, and I know that this lobby is taking place right now, is they don't follow the path they followed in the States when it pertains to online skins, which means that the land-based operators have been given X number of rights to operate online sites, and they sell those, lease those, they don't sell them, to online operators at relatively egregious rates. So it's to the benefit of the land-based operator for us coming in from esports. And the reason this got put into place was the land-based operators have been paying taxes and have invested, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure. So I can see, from their perspective, an online gambling and an online sports book would cannibalize some of their market. When you talk esports, there's not a casino in the States that has anything about that, but just giving them $10 million graph seems a bit so outrageous. So I really hope when the regulators are taking that into account, they don't just, to whoever just said it, cut and paste, because there's a lot of interesting and unique things here. Crypto's another conversation that's being had across, gaming commissions around the world, and that conversation has to be addressed somehow.
I have some insights on that. My understanding is that, and obviously things can change, but my understanding is that currently they're not going to be going with a sort of a market access deal approach that the US has gone through. They're going to open it broadly. My understanding is that they're not going to be allowing crypto either. In repeated conversations with the AGCO, they keep telling me that they don't want to create a new black market. They want to create a playing field that's fairly level, that's commercially viable, so that everybody comes in from out of the shadows, so to speak. And the way you do that is you don't do a US style market access deal regime. You just open it up. But that leads to your great point, Grant, which is, they recently rolled out a bunch of land-based concessions where, land-based operators came in, spent a lot of money getting those concessions and then investing in infrastructure. So how are they going to be handled? And the AGCO doesn't know yet. Answering the question of legislative hurdles, and we have to keep in mind that there's two regimes at work. There's the federal regime, and there's the provincial regime. So the legislative hurdles at the federal regime are, quite frankly, the Senate could say no, we're not going to accept this, and they can send it back to Parliament. If that happens, then we go through an arbitration proceeding, which rarely happens. And so there is a potential unknown there. You know, you get a senator or a Senate that is just not going to play ball. And in Ontario, there's so many questions up for grabs around data, crypto, esports, affiliates, land-based operators, bingo halls, racetracks, RG issues. You ask them these questions and they don't know yet.
Okay, that's us approaching 5 p.m. UK time, which I think is a 12 p.m. in Canada. So that's all we have time today for. So first of all, thank you everyone for listening today. And obviously I'd like to thank my fantastic panel. You know, I think we had some really interesting insights. And so, I'm really grateful for all you guys for taking part. And I'd also like to thank your comms teams for helping coordinate everything. And from the Clarion Gaming side, I'd also like to thank Stephanie Fleury for, kind of coordinating all the technical elements on our side. So final bits from me. This webinar has been recorded, so it's going to be available to listen on demand. And we're not done with Canada, of course. We're going to be returning to this across editorial and other discussion formats. Keep your eyes peeled. And sports betting in particular is going to be a key focus of Clarion Gaming's content in March. So again, more details on that to follow. And so yeah, that's everything for this IGB webinar. Thank you all very much for your time and attention. So we're going to be back on 9th of February is our next webinar, which is transforming your payment strategy with open banking in partnership with TrueLayer. So we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.